Hi, I'm Kim Elliott and I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Global Development. I'd like to tell you about an idea developed by a CGD working group that might help to stem the violence that's going on today in Syria. The United Nations estimates that 7,500 people have died since the protests against President Assad began last spring, and the violence has escalated in recent weeks. President Obama has called on the international community to use every tool available to stop the slaughter in Syria. Military intervention is one option, but that's extremely costly, and it's not clear how it would work in the Syrian context. Economic sanctions are another important tool, and the US, the European Union, and the Arab League have imposed stiff sanctions against Syria's oil sector and against its central bank. But Russia and China have blocked action at the United Nations that could extend those sanctions globally. So what else might be done? It's time for a new tool in the diplomatic toolkit that can bypass the UN bottleneck and raise costs for those firms and governments willing to keep doing business with the Assad regime. Now, the idea is simple, and if necessary, it could be implemented by a relatively small number of influential countries. The idea is that the major international financial center, joined by other concerned countries, would declare that as of that date, all new contracts with Syrian oil sector or regarding arms transfers and new loans to the Syrian government would be illegitimate. Those contracts would then not be enforceable in the courts of those countries if a future legitimate Syrian government decided to repudiate them. So, for example, Syria now is importing arms from Russia, and given its constrained financial situation, it's probably doing so on generous financial terms. Syria is also looking to China and other countries to buy the oil that the US and European Union are now shunning, and to get foreign investment that the European Union is no longer putting into their oil sector. Now, suppose that the US and the UK, home to the major international financial centers of New York and London, where some of these cases might be tried, followed the course that I outlined above and declared new contracts with Syria illegitimate. And hopefully they'd be supported by the EU and the Arab League to give the declaration more legitimacy. How would then people respond to that declaration? Would Russia continue to sell arms to Syria knowing that they might not get paid? In 2010, Russia sold $500 million worth of arms to Syria. So we're not talking peanuts. And would China or other countries reconfigure their oil refineries to handle the heavy crude that Syria exports, knowing that a future legitimate government might stop those supplies? Would anyone want to invest long-term in Syria, knowing that a future government might repudiate the contracts? Now, it is possible that some firms or governments might want to continue doing business with Syria, but they're going to want to be compensated for the extra risk that they're taking on under these sanctions. And so that would still impose a cost on Syria to keep doing this business. Now, these measures probably wouldn't have big impacts or immediate impacts, but they would help to further isolate Syria and to signal that the squeeze isn't going to let up anytime soon. That might move some Syrians that are currently on the fence to abandon the regime. And at a minimum, it would lower the burden for a future legitimate Syrian government and its citizens. If the international community fails to stop the assaults in Syria, more innocent people will die. Calling these contracts signed in the midst of this violence what they are, odious and illegitimate, and raising the risks for firms and governments doing business with the Assad regime is worth a try. Thank you.